You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Well, welcome to Dairy Business Podcast Series, The Dairy Voice. This particular episode sponsored by Showbox Sires. This is Tim Abbott, your host, and we're glad to get back into the 2026 year with new podcast series. Today's podcast is near and dear to my heart, as all of them are, but this one's got a special meaning. In our world of dairy that we talk about on this podcast series, we talk about putting 3 legs under your table of business. We talk about genetics and how important they are to what you do. We talk about marketing your product, telling people who you are and what you have. And then we talk about animal care and the husbandry practices that make great cattle better. But a big piece of that are the people behind the care of the animals. Today, we're going to go down a little bit of a different path, talking about people more than cows. It's my pleasure to introduce a topic of very significant importance to all of us that are listening. And we hope you'll share this podcast and you'll gain something for your own wisdom, but also to share with others. As many of you know, and I've been asked for the past year why I don't do a podcast on my personal battle with cancer. And frankly, I have not wanted to do that because I didn't know what path we would go down. But it came to myself and our producer, Dave Parker, this winter that maybe we could do a really fun podcast that will help people. It will give them some ideas. It will give them some good feeling about where to go, as every single one of us are impacted by the disease cancer. It impacts all of us, and we all have to listen to how we deal with it. In my journey, it started in February of 1998, a long time ago. I was moderately healthy, 30-couple-year-old guy. Went to my primary doctor, and I had a couple lumps in my neck. I kind of shuffed it off for a few months and went back, and they'd grown again. And basically, we did a biopsy, found that I had lymphoma, and my battle began. One of the luckiest days of my life was the day I walked into the office of Dr. Dennis Sanders, who at that time was a partner in the Vermont Center for Cancer Medicine. Dr. Sanders has become a great friend and a mentor of mine, and he has helped hundreds and hundreds of Vermont people battle cancer. And so I came up with the idea that this podcast series, I was going to get Dr. Sanders, who's newly retired and looking forward to his cross-country skiing later today, but to talk to him about how treatment and management of cancer has changed over the years, and hopefully give you all an introduction into some ideas of how you can manage it when it hits your family or yourself. And as I reflect, there's so many people along my journey that have impacted me so much, that several we have lost to cancer. One of my worst stories was watching young Logan Chalik in Alberta battle his disease and lose. And Logan was one of the most enthusiastic young people our business had, and what a tragedy for his family and our industry. And then one of my closest friends was Annette Ostrom from Wisconsin, who we battled the disease together, and unfortunately Annette lost her battle. But I do remember Annette before she passed away. I was with her just a week before, and I asked her what I could do, and she held my hands and said, frankly, you can battle this and not let it win and help others win too. So I think really this is dedicated to Annette. And then recently, good friends in the business, like Ian Crosby from Saskatchewan, young guy, healthy, energetic, is fighting a tough battle with cancer. One of my friends and mentors from Vermont, Bob Fitzsimmons, has been through a couple different battles in the past year. I could list hundreds and hundreds, but I bring those up because they are the people that inspired me to do this. So that's the background of what we're doing today. Now I'm going to get to the good part. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dennis Sanders, a good mentor and friend of mine. Dr. Sanders, sorry to make you wait so long, but welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Tim. It's my pleasure, and I hope I can provide some helpful information to your listeners and maybe answer any questions that you have that can help them answer questions as well.
You know, it's funny how any of us that are afflicted with this disease, the more people you talk to and the more education you get, the stronger you are. And you're a great advocate of that. So, Dr. Sanders, let's go back to who you are because I think our listeners will want to hear about it, hear about that. Tell us a little about where you came from. I know we've got a lot of California listeners, and they'll be shocked that a California guy lives in Vermont now. But tell us a little about where you came from, all that.
Sure. So I grew up in Merced County, California. So right smack dab in the middle. People would drive through the town, but not really stop. It was surrounded by farmland, dairies. My whole world was about agriculture growing up. And I spent time working on a friend's chicken layer raising farm. And they were just down the pathway from some bachelor farmers, dairymen who were there. So after graduating from high school, I went down to Southern California to try something totally different. And I was at University of California, Irvine. And I was down there, that's in just outside of Newport Beach. Beach living was kind of fun for about several years. And then I did my medical school down there. And then I wanted to change to a different part of the world. I always had lived in California. And so I came to Massachusetts and did my internship and residency. And following that, I went down to Bethesda, Maryland at the National Cancer Institute and had a wonderful opportunity to explore the science of understanding the biology of cancer. So I not only learned how to take care of patients, but really got to jump into the laboratory and learn the molecular biology and trying to find how in the world can we beat this beast. After finishing there, I went to Boston University for 3 years, trying to translate the information I had from the National Cancer Institute into the clinical practice, and found that I wasn't a very good scientist. I was a better clinician, and I had an opportunity to come to Vermont, and I did that in 1995 and have been here ever since. Just finished 30 years of clinical practice.
That's a great story. I know our California listeners, a lot of them are in Merced County and know just what you're talking about. Just to go off the trail a little bit. So when you went to Boston University, were you in research there? You weren't at a clinical practice there?
That's correct. I did both. The idea was we had made some discoveries in terms of how to influence how cells divide rapidly. And there were some natural products that we were basically plant-derived products that could inhibit the growth of the cells. And so we're trying to apply that to the laboratory, but also to humans. They're called phase 1 studies because these patients' disease had been resistant to everything else that had been thrown at them. So we were trying to find a way to slow the process down. And again, we did several what they call phase 1 studies for patients who were trying to get better with the brand newest discoveries we had. And that was my basis there.
This episode is brought to you by DRMS. DRMS is excited to launch the Fresh Cow Index, FCI, a new metric within the Herd HQ platform. FCI is featured in the Fresh Focus Transition Cow Reports inside Dairy Depot and will be available in DART in the future. FCI combines 25 individual cow variables from DHIA test day data and CDCB genetic evaluations into a single, easy-to-understand score for evaluating transition cow performance. A score of 100 indicates expected performance. Cows above 100 are outperforming predictions, while those below 100 are more likely to underperform and face early culling risk. Producers and consultants can use FCI to evaluate month-over-month changes in feeding and management, understand herd-level transition success, and drill down into Cow Compass for detailed cow-level insights. Herd HQ. See what's happening in your herd. Learn more at drms.org/herd/what-is-herd HQ.
And it's interesting, would you say most clinicians today have done the molecular research and the deep dive into the molecular level things that you have, Dennis, or is that a little bit unique?
It's pretty unique. I think most folks are pretty much clinically oriented, and it's hard to do both. I mean, it's a discipline of both being a laboratory scientist, but also a clinician. There's only so many hours in a day, and you're so many brain cells that have to be engaged.
You said, you thought you were a better clinician than scientist. What kind of drove you to go down that road?
Which done a clinician? Or?
Yeah, as a clinician.
Well,
like,
again,
was there something in particular?
Well, I'll back up and say I always had an interest in medicine. I really, in my high school years, I spent a summer in Japan, and one of the families I was a village physician. I went through his books and just enjoyed that challenge. And so as I went through college and medical school, I had a knack for understanding molecular biology. And so what I was able to do, I think, was meld my knowledge of the basic science, molecular biology of what makes a cancer cell be a cancer cell, but understanding the human body in terms of how can I make this person get better based on that knowledge. And so my ideal, which I think for 30 years, I feel like I've done a good job, is I can interpret basic science information and actually interpret new findings for clinical research and apply them to current day patient care. And that's been fun. I mean, I just feel like I started on the ground floor of molecular knowledge and continued to build upon that over the years. It's been wonderful.
That's so powerful because it gets you to that point. And I will say, as one of your patients, you've got an incredible ability to read the science, understand the science, and translate it to those of us that are patients that can't speak the language. And there's a gift, right? Like a lot of the things that you've told me over the years, I didn't understand until you boil them down. And that's a gift, and it's very important for us as patients, right?
It is. I think, and that's the hard part for many physicians is the ability to teach their patients how to be their own advocates and to understand what their disease process. And please ask questions and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, because I don't have a problem saying that I don't know. If you ask me a question, I don't know, I promise you I'll do my best to research and find you an answer. And if there's no answer, I'll tell you that as well.
To switch, and this is the dangerous part of this interview. I met you 25 years ago, a little more than 25 years ago. I will never forget walking into your office because I didn't think I was very unhealthy. You had ordered a PET scan on me, and I remember it back then. We put the PET scan on a light and showed up the X-ray or the scan, and I knew that light spots meant cancer tumors, and I looked like a Christmas tree. And so can you tell, and the dangerous part of this is, I don't know if I want you to tell about me, but tell a little bit of how you and I have been through this together.
So the good news is you're curious and you ask questions, and also you've been healthy. I'm putting healthy in air quotes. You've actually been through a tremendous amount and are able to bounce back. You faced the uncertainties, the mental anguish, the physical anguish, and yet here you are today doing this podcast. So when we first met, you were in, I think, mid 30s, early 30s. You had a couple of young daughters, running your business, your life, and you had some enlarged lymph nodes in your neck. And when we figured out what you had, which was a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it's not very common in young people. It's usually more common in older folks like me, but in any event, you had it. And so when we had to evaluate you, the treatments were based upon how advanced is your disease. So you mentioned the PET scan. So that's where you inject radioactive sugar water in your body, and glucose, sugar, is metabolized in all of our cells in our body. Cancer cells metabolize the glucose much more rapidly than your normal cells. So you get these big bright spots that you saw in the scan. And so you had lymph nodes. You have thousands of them in your body, and your lymph nodes are in your neck, in your chest, in your abdomen, in your bone marrow. I mean, you had a pretty widespread, what they call stage 3B lymphoma. And then we talked about what we're going to do for treatment. And the good news, as I tried to say at the time, was this lymphoma is highly responsive to therapy, but at that time, and I probably should say this now, it's still not a curative cancer. We put people in remission. It can last for several years. Eventually, the tumor comes back, and then we treat again. And in those days, most people would say, if you're lucky, you get probably 3 to 5 years of free time, and then the disease ramps up. And you had a couple of years, and you had a relapse. And we started with chemo. If you quite remember that. I think 3 different varieties of that. And you had great responses each time, but you always had a relapse. And the amazing thing, going back to the biology and molecular biology, is we started to figure out if we could turn on your immune system, we could get a handle on cancer. And that was the first thing we did, was we treated you with a drug that turned your immune system, made it awake and go after your lymphoma.
I'm going to have you dig into that because I think the listeners will appreciate the science with that. Basically, you found a drug that you gave me that made my immune system realize the cancer cells were bad, and they helped along with the chemotherapy or whatever treatment, right? Is that how that worked?
It does. So chemotherapy, by definition, is meant to slow a rapidly growing cell. It sort of, I don't like to use the word poison because it's way overused. It's a tool to stop the normal way a cell divides. But your immune system, for many people when they have cancer, is either blinded because tumor cells secrete factors to put your immune system to sleep, or they don't recognize the cancer cells any different than your normal cells. So we've found ways, now there's probably 5 or 6 different ways, to tell your immune system, hey, wake up, go after these cancer cells. And so either using chemotherapy in combination with immunotherapy or immunotherapy alone, we're getting more and more people in remission, and remissions are lasting much, much longer. So even in incurable diseases, we can turn it into a chronic disease, much in the way that diabetes is not curable, but you can control it, or hypertension is not curable, but you can control it. Cancer is evolving in that direction.
I think it's so powerful for our listeners, Dr. Sanders, to listen and re-listen to those words, because many of us, myself included, when you find out you have cancer, you assume you're dead. You think there is nothing. And what you've just said is there are ways, there are many, many victory stories, and there are many different tools to get there. 2 different things I want to hit on. One is you reference being your own advocate early on. And we talk about that with detection. We talk about that with treatment. Talk about being an advocate for yourself and your own health. That's very important.
It's interesting because I think people or patients nowadays have so many more options to be their own advocate. So again, in your days, the internet was barely in its infancy. So if you really wanted to find out information, you had to go to a library and dig in and do these things. Nowadays, you can just query, put a button in, punch a name, and all of a sudden you have 10,000 pieces of information. That's both good and bad because not all that information is reliable. And unfortunately, we're stuck in an environment where there's sort of misinformation put out there. So you have to look at the information, but rely upon your professional, your doctor, to answer your questions. So if you say, I read where orange juice is going to make my head fall off if I drink too much of it, well, that's probably not true. Or if I eat raw peanuts, it's going to make my cancer go away. That's probably not true. Someone just wants to sell you a lot of peanuts. So you have to kind of look at the information, but talk to the professionals about it. It's okay to be skeptical, but also when there's information presented that's pretty black and white, just go with it. That's my best advice.
No, that's good advice. And I think I learned that over time, and luckily I didn't have Dr. Google today, back then, because I think it can take you, it's sure great to get information, but boy, it can take you down paths of destruction mentally.
That's correct.
And I'm very critical of Dr. Google because we read and you don't read all the information that Google gives you. You read what you want to see. And sometimes it's, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, or this, my disease kills people, right? Like I could get on and read 100 different articles that say you're going to die from this disease. Doesn't mean it has to.
Yeah, and that's the key also for anyone going through a disease is you get information, everything that you're told is sort of on an average. You're above average, meaning that you're saying, well, look, I'm me. You tell me the statistics for 100 people, but I'm a unique individual. So let's talk about me as that individual in terms of advocating for yourself. Here are my options. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I believe in. Here's what I don't believe in. That way you help define your pathway in terms of treatments.
And to finish this little section, the other thing you gave me, which I thought was tremendous advice at the time, was go get a second opinion. I admired you. I knew at that point you were my doctor because you had no threat by that. You said, I want you to get the best. You knew that I was not going to get any other answers probably at Dana-Farber in Boston, but you invited me to go there. You helped me set up there. And I think sometimes the second opinion thing, we all worry I probably wouldn't have done it, Dr. Sanders, if you hadn't told me to, because I was afraid I would have insulted you. And you took it to a whole different level, and I've learned from you, and I think our listeners should hear that.
Well, I think it's true. I think what my philosophy at the time and still is if you go somewhere else and you learn something that's beneficial to you, I should know that. If I don't know that, I need to learn that. And I certainly need to be Mr. Humble because I don't know it all and things change out there. And so just getting a reassurance that you don't have to travel to Boston, which in that case would have been, 3-hour round trip several times a week for treatment, you can get it in your own backyard. That's a benefit to you to say, hey, I can get the same thing in my own backyard. That was why I loved practicing in Vermont, was I could do anything you could get in the big cities right here in your backyard for the most part. And I love that.
It worked for me. It's amazing how close to home I was treated and got well. So in our 25 years, would you say this will be fun? What things did I do right as a patient of yours?
Mostly you ask questions. You also were incredibly positive, meaning you had your family you wanted to live for. You had your business that you enjoyed. You wanted to be physically active. You were willing to put up with, I'm going to call them short-term months inconvenience for the long-term game of years of life. And those are things philosophically you're the ideal patient. And also, more importantly, you just maintain a positivity about you. And I think we were also fortunate because you continue to get positive results. And it doesn't always happen, as you have alluded to, with friends and family members. And that's a hard place to be many times. But you have that inner strength, I'm sure, that you draw from your family and friends.
I guess in fair play here, what did I do wrong?
Let's see. Probably didn't exercise as much as I would have liked you to for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But you didn't do anything wrong. You just lived your life. See, that's what I think. I always try to dispel this idea that a cancer patient must have brought something onto them. They did something lifestyle wise in the past. That's why they got sick. Now it's like, no, it's just random. And if you had been a smoker, I would have been very disappointed if you had continued to smoke cigarettes with lung cancer. It's like, come on, man, let's get real here. Why are you feeding your cancer? I'm putting, water on the fire, and you're putting gasoline. That makes no sense. You never did that. And that's a beauty thing right there.
Well, and honestly, I kind of giggle when I say that because I didn't take as good a care of myself probably as I should have through this at times. Also, you really instilled into me, it doesn't matter if you're fighting cancer or diabetes, if you get yourself healthy in all other aspects, it has a big impact, right? And I think that's important.
It does. You didn't ever abuse your body, and it's sunk in at various times. I was like, yeah, if I am in better physical shape, if I do get sick, I'm in a better place to fight that disease. And that's the hardest thing to teach people. It's like you want to be in the best shape you can, because chances are you're going to have to fight the battle again. This is an ongoing, lifelong experience, not just a one-off procedure.
And I truly think I became more physically fit. I became more mentally fit, and I put more time into myself to battle this than I had before that. And I think that's something that people can draw from this. So
I agree. But also, you did not obsess about your disease either, Tim. And that's finding the balance. And this is something that, as a clinician, and I find myself as a teacher to try and help people say, yeah, you're still Tim Abbott. You happen to have cancer, but you're not Tim Abbott with cancer. You know what I'm saying? You're not being defined by this. You're just getting on with your life.
Let's go to that. And I want to get back to the science. But right now, the other piece of this puzzle I wanted to talk about is the mental health and how you attack it. And you've started, again, we're talking cancer today, but I don't think it's any different if it's diabetes or it's your common cold. Talk to me about how you've treated thousands of patients. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, what are some of the pitfalls? And you started down this road, but I'd like you to go a little farther. A few of the pitfalls and a few of the successes. How do you keep your mind right?
Boy, it's so individualized. I think you have to, first off, set reasonable goals in what you're doing. So again, I try and be as honest with a patient as possible. So you, again, fortunately, have always been relatively healthy. There's a lot of folks, by the time I meet them, they haven't gone to their doctor, they have metastatic lung cancer, lost 30, 40 pounds, or in pain. You have to set goals or say, okay, what are we going to do first to make your quality of life better because you have not had quality of life for 4 or 6 months. And what are we going to do to help slow this process for cancer? So you have to tap into those people's strengths, and you have to recognize that there's fear. And many times bringing up the idea, are you afraid? Asking the question in different ways. Tell me what you're afraid of. These are important doors and windows to open because many people are stoic. They don't want to tell you what's going on. Farmers being some of those, dairy people especially, they just not going to talk about it. Well, actually, you need to talk about this. So those are giant pitfalls. If you can't talk about your illness because of fear, or you're afraid to even ask questions, that's a stumbling block. That's a huge stumbling block.
Great.
And then you start taking, okay, so now we get a positive result. How do we build upon that? And we go back to, again, philosophically, where's your headspace? What's your family's headspace? And those are things you had that each individual requires time and effort. And I always encourage my patients to bring their family members there. So I get the 40,000 questions and the reams of internet information. I don't mind that because that means this family's concerned. And on your bad days, they're going to be there to help you with your good days.
Part of Tim Abbott's success has been my family, and particularly Sharon. Sharon's been in the room with me many times, Dr. Sanders, in our appointments. But I've said oftentimes, I think this has been harder on Sharon than it has me. I've got the disease, I know how to treat it. If I don't get through it, Sharon's got a lot on her plate. And I think sometimes how we deal with our loved ones that are helping us through this is critical. And you've seen it, I'm sure.
I have. And the hard part, again, goes back to trying to dissect out, is there good communication skills within the patient and the family? And that's why I invite everybody into the room, because I'd say, we're going to lay our cards on the table. Here's your chance to ask questions. And I can at least get a feel for maybe where some potential stumbling blocks are down the road. Does it require counseling? Does it require more intervention in terms of discussions? Just feeling it all out, because cancer is not, you don't win this battle by yourself. It's a family affair. It's a friend affair. It's your professional affair. Everybody's like pulling for you.
And I say one of the great blessings of me having this disease is I have been able to advocate for others and help them through the process, as many people have. And that's a great gift I've been given, because I take it very seriously, because you've taught me and others that, how to go out to others and help them, just as you say.
Well, the thing is, I can say a lot of words, but I've never walked in your shoes, and you have credibility because you've walked in those shoes. You can say, I've been as low as you can get, and here I am walking up on top of the ridge right now. So, that's important.
How many patients would you say you have treated in your time at Vermont Center for Cancer Medicine? 30 years.
4,000 to 5,000 probably.
So I guess, talk about street cred, that's pretty strong. So, and again, I've sat beside many of them in your chemo rooms and in your office. And one other thing I would go to with that is the people that you surrounded yourself with in your business. The people you worked with and your nursing staff. Tell us a little about them and how that worked for you.
Well, I was thinking about that the other day when I was closing down our practice. Is we didn't have a lot of turnover of staff because everyone took it seriously. From the people who called you to remind you of your appointments, to the people who brought you in for your vital signs, our nursing staff asking you questions. We worked as a team, and I think that sort of team spirit was conveyed to our patients. They kind of got the feeling that, well, if I told Nurse Marty something, she's going to tell Dennis what's going on. Or if I mention something to our receptionist, they're going to mention it to me, because we all work together and they understand. They want to know you as a person. And one of our favorite person in our practice was our practice manager, Michelle Pascal. And one thing that she had always told our employees was, we don't make widgets here. We're here to help people, and we take everything they say seriously. And our philosophy was, patients come first, and if we do the right thing by the patient, everything else is going to be fine. And it was. We were very fortunate, had a great practice.
And the reason I go down that road, again, we talk a lot about team building in our industry, at the farm level or at the genetic company level. How do we do that? And I think if people could have seen your business and watched it operate like I did, many times, Dennis, you had to wait to come in as the physician in my appointment because I was too busy talking to other people in your practice, the receptionists or the nurses or the other doctors, right?
Yeah.
And that's the family you built. And I think there's a message to our listeners there about you empowered those people to not build widgets. You empowered them to take care of people, just like we empower people to take care of our cows, right?
Right.
So the next area I want to get into just a little bit is part of what I want to relay to our listeners is the change in science in the past 25 years. And I understand each cancer is different and you've treated hundreds of them, but talk to me a little bit about what you've seen, whether it's with my particular cancer or other cancers. What is going on with research and development and changing this disease?
Yeah, I would say, boy, that's a great question. And I'm going to give you a not linear answer, if that's okay. The most important thing is from a scientific level, molecular biology, we are understanding that all cancers aren't the same. They have different molecular pathways of how they become cancer. And what we're also understanding is the causes of these cancers vary. There's environmental cancer, so tobacco smoke, other environmental factors, which may include things like pesticides and insecticides, which was kind of alluded to by Dave earlier on in the dairy industry. These are all potential issues that we're trying to understand. But more importantly, at the molecular level, once we define how a cell goes from a normal cell to an abnormal cell based on how the genes are expressed, the chromosomes are damaged and they express things differently, we have developed tools or medications which can either block those pathways and slow the growth of the cells. And then the most important breakthrough is just really unlocking an individual's immune system. That has really revolutionized where we're going to go in the future, for not only for cancer, but for other diseases, autoimmune diseases, heart disease. I mean, the list is getting longer and longer because the immune system has unchecked potential to help us with multiple diseases.
In my terms, what you're saying is we're learning more about switching our own bodies to fight whichever disease it is, and using some of our own resources rather than just a mechanical resource.
That's right. And I think we just have never understood how important, at least in terms of cancer, how adaptive cancer cells are at confusing our immune system for their own survival. I mean, it's devilish, and this is not about spiritual philosophy. It's about how nature adapts, and nature hates a vacuum. And the cancer cells figure out a way to find that niche to get in there and take advantage of it.
And even in my battle, we've now switched to a new kind of cancer because my cells morphed and it changed me to a different type of cancer now that I'm fighting, which is leukemia, which is right a cousin of what I started with, but it's because cells morphed. Is that kind of what you're?
It's part of it. So yeah, you're unique in the regard that you went from a lymphoma, slow growing lymphoma, but still significant lymphoma, which stayed in remission. And then over time, the genetic machinery in your body probably got new mutations in a different cell line. So your bone marrow makes white blood cells, and there's, let's just say, 40 different white blood cells. Lymphocytes are a type of white blood cells that knocked out of whack. I gave you lymphoma. We kind of quieted those down, but you also have white blood cells that fight off infections. They're called leukocytes, and you developed one or two mutations in those, which blossomed up into the chronic leukemia that you have right now. So they're related, but they're probably two separate cell lines. And genetically, you're the one who has these susceptible genes to, I think, to your environment and aging and whatever factors that make this happen.
Sure.
But the interesting thing also, just as an aside, is because we've gotten so successful at controlling cancer, like I'll have many patients who've had 4 different malignancies over the 25 years I've known them, because genetically they're susceptible, but also we succeed in keeping one from causing their death. And they live long enough to get the second one, and we take care of that. And they live long enough to get a third one, and long enough to get the fourth one. So that's the irony of our success in oncology, is we're actually making people live longer and also seeing the genetics of getting more cancer.
Which again, you've kind of told me that's the path I'm probably going to be on and have been on, and hey, I'll take that. That's we'll fight the next one when we get it, right? I guess as we go back to science and research, you've given us a good glimpse of that. For our patients that are listening, can you give them a little advice about when they do find out? Like we've given them several different pieces, whatever kind of cancer. I know you can't give them specific, but if you were to say these 3 things are the things you need to do going in here. Maybe can you hit two or three things that if I find out from my primary doctor that I've got some type of cancer, my next step should be?
Consulting with a medical oncologist, which is what I am. And usually they act as a facilitator to then you need to see a surgeon, you need to see a radiation doctor, you need more imaging, but you need a cheerleader, you need someone who's going to run with your case. So a medical oncologist is the key. And they're going to explain to you what your diagnosis is and do you have a curable cancer. So there's different stages in cancer. Stages 1 through 3 are potentially curable for no matter what: breast, ovarian, colon cancer, lung cancer. Stage 4 or metastatic cancer, by definition, is not curable. So your efforts and your understanding of what you're trying to achieve differs if you understand that basic part right there.
To me, that's so critical because not all cancers are created equal.
That's correct. And that's really important to understand because, again, the fear factor overwhelms people's ability to take in what you're telling them. And you have to repeat things many times, but you have to say, let's try and keep things less fearful and more concrete at this point in time.
And I think, where I'm going with this might be the most profound thing for our listeners. As a person from the outside looking in, when your friend or your relative finds out they have cancer, understand that there's several different beasts here. Not all cancers are the same. And you need to understand where your support needs to go. Either if it's 1 through 3 and we're going to fix this, great. If it's stage 4, then we're going to fix some other things.
Right.
That I think that's pretty profound to our listeners, that too many times you hear, oh, Joe Smith has cancer. Well, how long has he got to live? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Those days are over.
There's so much mythology around the diagnosis of cancer, and it's sort of well deserved because nobody wanted to talk about cancer. Nobody wants to, admit they had cancer in the 40s, 50s. We didn't even understand it. We couldn't diagnose it properly. It was truly a death sentence in those days. As time has gone on, trying to shed that mythology has been hard because we had to re-educate ourselves that not all cancer is going to cause you to die, but also don't be afraid of it. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out there in the open. Let's diagnose it early. I mean, one of the things that I did in Vermont was try and educate our policymakers, the legislature, that we need to improve our screening for things like colon cancer and breast cancer and prostate cancer, because if we catch cancer early, this is curable. And this is a disease that as our population gets older, we're going to have more cancer. So let's figure out a way to catch it early. And let's have the population, meaning the average Joe, buy into that concept. Like, get your colonoscopy, make sure you get your mammograms. If something changes in your body physically, go to your doctor and let them help you figure out what's going on.
Well, I think all great advice. And this has been just exactly what I had wanted, Dr. Sanders. I think we've given our listeners a real practical view of maybe something that we all know inherently, but I think there's been, a lot of good information shared. If you were to crystal ball this in 10 years, what is Dr. Sanders' vision of what cancer treatments will be? Will it change a lot in the next decade in your mind?
Absolutely. It's going to be, again, truly transformative in terms of a chronic illness. And it's going to be more patients treated in their backyard as opposed to having to go into major cancer centers, which again is going to help apply therapies globally. I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, much of what we do is technically hard, expensive, eats up a lot of resources. But as we get better at providing care globally, we'll be able to bring these treatments to everybody, not just people in the United States.
That's exciting. And I think for me, again, I've seen that in 25 years of watching this and learning about it. And I think the last 25 years have changed from my very practical level, from yours. I'm sure it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's wonderful to see.
So I guess, and I'm not making a plea for donations to any organization. That's not the point of this. But truly, cancer research is working, right? And so whether you donate or you support that, or your legislators do, or whatever, it's still important, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. In fact, in these times, science is being attacked left and right, which I truly don't understand. But any advocacy for the National Cancer Institute in terms of basic research, and also cancer centers around the country, I'm fearful that there's so much misdirected anger at people who have knowledge, science, it's surprising to me. I guess I'm learning how naive I am as to how people can be swayed to ignore important information. So advocate for funding for research. I mean, that's the best I can tell you. I don't care how it's done. I don't care where you do it, and make sure it's objective research, not biased research, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And National Cancer Institute research seems to be the gold standard, right? But
it is.
And direction from them seems to be the way to go. So, well, I think I've taken a lot of your time here today. It's time for you to hit the skis in Vermont. So this is the tough part of this call for me. After 30 years of practice, you've decided to spend more time in your beautiful home in Vermont and on your skis. And as of the first of the year, you're not my oncologist anymore. You're just my friend. We've morphed from an oncologist to a friend relationship, and I'm very, very fortunate for that. I'm very sad that I don't have you as my lead doctor today. But I think, again, this is another lesson that this is all going to change. And I have a great new doctor that I have to build a relationship with. I thank you, Dr. Sanders, on behalf of thousands of Vermont patients and families. You've touched people from all over the world. You are a true icon in the business. And before I get too emotional here, what the heck are you going to do with all your time? You've given all your time to us for the past 30 years. What's Dr. Sanders going to do for fun?
Well, right now, I'm just taking a big, deep breath and exhaling very slowly. I guess I'm enjoying not having structure. I've been writing, so I'm writing a contemporary science fiction story just because it's been brewing in me for all these years, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's a lot of fun. So I get lost in my own head for a while. I don't have a plan. I've never not had a plan. It's fun.
Well, that's great. You've to be at the point you were from an educational standpoint and a career standpoint and then a business standpoint. You've always had that. And the reason I end up this conversation with this, many of us don't know how to do what you're doing today. Whether it's me or it's the guy that's got the dairy farm trying to transition it to his sons or his daughters or his partners. It's a really tough thing, isn't it, to figure out your next step?
It is, because I think realistically, assuming my health doesn't change radically, I have another third of my life ahead of me to do stuff. I mean, I'm late 60s. I like physical activity, like mental activities, play music. I mean, I do a lot of stuff which has been sort of on hold. I'm not going to go out and become a rock drummer, but music is going to be a part of my life again. And I'm looking forward to that.
Can't wait for one of our concerts. Most of our listeners know I'm a big music fan, and I'm going to have Dr. Sanders, the drummer, there one day now. Well, Dr. Sanders, anything you'd like to leave our listeners with before we wrap this up?
Mostly, I would say, again, if you or your family members are diagnosed with cancer, there's always hope. And you're a great example that there's not a hope, but there's an example that things do work. And always take care of yourself. And if you feel like you need to know more information, look it up, because it's out there, and ask questions. There's plenty of people who want to help, and get your screenings, whatever those screenings are, and enjoy life.
That's the perfect way to end this podcast. I thank Dr. Dennis Sanders, the founder of the Vermont Center for Cancer Medicine. He and his partners built a wonderful business that helped, as I've said, thousands of Vermonters for years develop their fight. I hope we've brought something to our listeners all over the world. Dr. Sanders, we've got listeners from every corner of the globe to this now, and I hope we've impacted people in many different continents and many different countries. So my sincere thanks.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and it's nice to see you in that sunny Florida room.
It is great. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of the Dairy Voice. Ironically, our podcast series is called The Evolution of the Great Cow. Today, I don't know that we talked so much about the evolution of the great cow, but I think we talked about the evolution of the people that care for her. And I hope you take some of this information, go forward, and it helps you. Thanks for listening, and we'll look forward to having you on our next podcast.